Happy Thursday, Kings and Queens. It is Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. We are jumping into Math 7 Unit 1, Lesson 7a. Again, our classroom norms, as per usual, are that your cameras are to be on, your mics are muted unless you are sharing with the class, of course, and that you guys are ready to learn and chat. Our materials for today are your Math 7 Spiral Notebook. We are working on page 18. That is page 18 of your Math 7 Spiral Notebook. You will need your pencil and, of course, the student companion that is found in Google Classroom in order to get credit for today's live lesson. So today we're going to be talking about percent increase and decrease. So, of course, day one, we're talking about increasing and decreasing. Our standards for today are 7.rp.3, and we have three different objectives today. Our first objective is that students will coordinate statements about percent increase or percent decrease with comparisons to the original amount. For example, 20% increase means the new value is 120% of the original value. We're also going to talk about interpreting a tape diagram to represent a situation that involves adding or subtracting a percentage of the initial value. And we're going to explain how to calculate the new amount given the original amount and a percentage of increase or decrease. So our mathematical practices for today are MP2, MP3, and MP6. And those are to reason abstractly and quantitatively, construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others, and to attend to precision. So as usual, we want to make sure that we're ready to take notes and work collaboratively with your classmates. We will pause here for about 2 minutes so that you guys can copy down the standard and the objectives onto page 18 of your spiral notebook. Okay, let's keep moving. So our goals for today are going to be that we want to be able to interpret a tape diagram. So that's one key vocabulary term that represents a percent increase or decrease. And we also want, when I know a starting amount and the percent increase or decrease, we want to be able to find what the new amount is going to be. So let's go ahead and dive right into our work. And we're going to start with our engagement activity, and we're going to work collaboratively on this activity. Our engagement activity is entitled Improving Their Game. So it says, here are the scores from 3 different sports teams from their last 2 games. So if you look at the table that we have here, we have the first column is the sports teams. We have the football team, the basketball team, and the baseball team. And it says the total number of points in game 1 and the total points in game 2. So the first question that we want to ask ourselves is, what do you notice about the team scores and what do you wonder? So let's pause here. And I want you guys to put in the chat, what do you notice about the team scores and what do you wonder? So we'll pause here so that you have about a minute and 30 seconds to put your noticings and your wonderings into the chat. Okay, now that you guys have had the chance to actually go ahead and put your responses in the chat, let's now answer the second question. The second question is, which team improved the most, and explain your reasoning, and then be prepared to share your reasoning. So I want you guys to take about 1 minute of quiet think time and think about which team do you think improved the most and why. And then I'll have you guys share out in just a second. Okay, so let's have one student share out their answer to number 2. And once that student shares in the chat, ladies and gentlemen, I want you guys to put whether or not you agree or disagree. So we'll pause here for one student to share out number 2, and then we'll have you guys agree or disagree. So let's pause here now. Okay, great. So let's just recap a little bit. So for number one, you guys may have noticed that each team improved by 8 points, like from 22 to 30, 100 to 108, 4 to 12. The basketball team had the most points, might be another one noticing. And the baseball team's score in game two was three times as much in game one, which is a threefold increase. Okay. So for looking at number two, when we talk about which team improved the most, the baseball team actually improved the most because their 8 point increase was triple their previous score. While the other teams, they were multiplied by a smaller factor or scale factor, like 1.1, or for the basketball team, 1.4 for the football team. So the baseball team actually increased the most. So let's keep moving. So now we're going to jump into our exploration activity entitled Cereal and a Discounted Shirt. So if you notice, there's a little symbol at the bottom that we're going to do some work in our journals, and that our student companions is going to have the exploration activity. So we want to make sure that we are capturing our work in the student companion. So let's go to the exploration activity. Number one says a cereal box says that now it contains 20% more. And it says originally it came with 18.5 ounces of cereal. And it says, how much cereal does the box come with now? So I want you guys to see if you can figure out how to solve this problem. If I started with 18.5 ounces of cereal and now it has 20% more, then what is the how much cereal does the box come with now? We'll give you guys about 5 minutes of quiet work time, and then we'll come back together to have a whole group discussion. So we'll pause here for you guys to think about your work in your journals, and then we will input it into our student companions. All right, let's come back together. So, the first question that I want you guys to answer in the chat is, did the number of ounces of cereal in the box increase or decrease? So, in the chat, let's type increase or decrease now. And then the second question that we want to ask is, what percentage of the original amount of cereal is the new amount of cereal? So let's just talk through some of these problems. So obviously, the number of ounces in the cereal box increased. Hopefully, you noticed that. Once again, hopefully you noticed that the cereal box gained 3.7 ounces because 20% of 18.5 is 0.2 times 18.5, right? To find 20% of 18.5 ounces of cereal, I have to multiply 20%, which is 0.2 as a decimal. So I'm going to take 0.2 and multiply by 18.5. And when I do that in my calculator, it gives me 3.7. So I need to add that 3.7 to my original 18.5 to get 22.2 ounces, which is what is in the cereal box now. So I know I just said a lot, so let's go over that again. We have 20, the problem tells me that it has 20% more. Well, we need to figure out what 20% is of 18.5%. So when I change 20% into a decimal, it becomes 0.2. Then I'm going to multiply 0.2 times 18.5, and that equals 3.7. So now I have what 20% is of 18.5, but I can't just stop there. I have to take that number, 3.7, and add it to 18.5 to get my final answer, which is 22.2. So the cereal box now has 120%, as many ounces of cereal as it originally had. Because remember, we had our initial, which was 100, plus another 20% equals 120. So it has 22.5 ounces of cereal. And another way that I could have found that was either doing 20% times 18.5 and adding that number to my original ounces, or I could have done 120% times 18.5, and that would have took me right to my final answer. If I did 120%, that's 1.2 as a decimal, and I could have multiplied that by 18.5, and that also would have given me my answer of 22.2. So let's look at number 2. It says the price of a shirt is $18.50, but you have a coupon that lowers the price by 20%. What is the price of this shirt after using the coupon? So the first thing we want to know is the price of the shirt going to increase or decrease? So let's put increase or decrease in the chat. Let's put increase or decrease in the chat. So you should have noticed that the price of this shirt is going to decrease because remember our coupon, or what we know about coupons, if I have a coupon for a store, is going to take money off of the price. It's going to lower the price. And in this case, it's lowering the price by 20%. And it says, what is the price of the shirt after using the coupon? And what percentage of the original price of the shirt is the new price of the shirt? So let's go ahead and think through this, just like we did the last problem. And I want you guys to think about what your final answers are going to be. So we're going to pause here for about 2 minutes so you can think through this problem. Okay, so hopefully you notice that the new price of the shirt is going to be $14.80. And that means that the price dropped by $3.70 because 20% of $18.50, well, we just figured the same kind of math out in the last problem, right? If I did 20% of 1850, that's 0.2 times 18.50. And when I put that into a calculator, that gives me 3.70 once again. So instead of adding 3.70 to the price like we did in the last problem, because we're lowering the price, we're going to subtract it. So that means that the shirt will cost $14.80 because 18.50 minus 3.70 equals 14.80. So in this case, that means that the sale price is 80% of the original price. When we say the sale price is 80%, it's because we're taking 20% off of the whole. So 100% minus 20% is 80. So the alternative way that we could solve this problem is that we can do 80% times my price. So 80% as a decimal is 0.8 times 18.50 still gives me my final answer of 14.80 or $14.80. So there are multiple ways that you can solve this problem. If we need to go over this again, we will rewind the video at this time to make sure that we understand that problem. All right, let's keep moving. So we know that 100% always corresponds to the original amount before the change. So let's recap just a little bit. A cereal box says that it contains 20% more. So this is an example of a percent increase because we're increasing it by 20%. The price of a shirt lowers the price by 20%. This is an example of percent decrease because we're lowering it by 20%. Let's pause the video here so that you can copy this slide down into your journals because this is going to be important as vocabulary. So we're going to pause the video here for about 1 minute and 30 seconds so you can copy down this slide. All right, now we're going to move forward and talk about using tape diagrams for the explanation activity. And this can also be found in your student companion. So we're going to go to this next slide and it says, explain how each of these are related to the tape diagram. So let's look at number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. And I want you guys in your explanation in your student companion, just jot down what your thoughts are. X is represented by the 4 green colored boxes, and Y is going to be the total 5 boxes. So the 4 green and the 1 white boxes. So I want you guys to think about, what does this mean to you, and put that into your into your student companion. So let's share out some of our thinking. So these are my thoughts. When I look at number 1, it says x plus 1/4 of x. So here we have x is 4 of these boxes. We have all 4 green ones, and that we're going to add another fourth of that x will be one of these rectangles. So that's how it's related to the entire thing. So if I have the 4 boxes and I add one more, that would give me the total for y. When I look at number 2, it tells me y equals 1.25x. Well, this is telling me 125% of x, or I'm increasing it by a percentage because I'm starting with 4 and I'm increasing it by 25%. So I'm going to multiply it by that decimal, which will be 1.25. If we notice 125%, well, this could represent the total increase. The new increase could be 125%. And number 4, where it says an increase of 25%, that means that x might be my original, and I'm increasing it by 25% to get to y. So those are just some of my thoughts. Now, let's look at the next slide, and it says using tape diagrams. So we want to be able to match each situation to a diagram and be prepared to share your thinking. So let's take about 2 minutes, and I want you guys to be able to match each situation to a diagram and be prepared to share your thinking. Obviously, you're going to use the diagrams on the right side more than once. So you're going to take letter choice A, B, C, or D and say, does it match with diagram A or does it match with diagram B? And we're going to take 2 minutes, pause here, and we'll come back together. All right, so let's go ahead and check our work. So for the first one, A, where it says compared with last year's strawberry harvest, this year's strawberry harvest is a 25% increase. That matches with diagram A, because a 25% increase from last year means this year's harvest corresponds to 125% of last year's harvest. So the rectangle for this year is 125% of the rectangle for last year. So we're increasing by 25%. So that goes with diagram A. Hopefully you guys got that one right. Now let's look at B. B is this year's blueberry harvest is 75% of last year's. Hopefully you realize that that goes with diagram B, because the rectangle for this year is 75% of the rectangle of last year. So we're decreasing by 25%. So therefore it goes with diagram B. Okay. Option C says compare with last year. This year's peach harvest decreased 25%. So letter choice C also goes with diagram B because a 25% decrease from last year means that this year's harvest corresponds to 75% of last year's harvest. And the rectangle for this year is 75% of the rectangle for last year. And last but not least, option D, where it says this year's plum harvest is 125% of last year's plum harvest. That goes with diagram A because the rectangle for this year is 125% of the rectangle for last year. So we're increasing by 25%, therefore it goes with diagram A. So A was diagram A, B was diagram B, C was diagram B, and D was diagram A. So let's recap. So we've talked about what it means about what's another way to describe a 25% increase or decrease. Well, if I'm describing a 25% increase, that means that it's 125%, or if it's a 25% decrease, it becomes 75%. And it says when a quantity is increased or decreased, what percent describes the original or starting value? So once again, we have either when we're talking about our starting value is 100%, and we're either increasing it by a percentage or decreasing it by a percentage. And then what strategies have we used to help us calculate the percent increase or decrease? Well, let's go back to our example of 25%. There's two ways that I can find it. If I'm increasing, I can take 25% and change it to a decimal and multiply by 0.25 and multiply that by the original and either add it if it's an increase or subtract it if we're decreasing. Or because we know that we're just going to take the percentage, if I'm increasing it, I can multiply it by 125%. Or if I'm decreasing it, I can multiply it by 75%. And of course, 125% as a decimal will be 1.25, and 75% as a decimal will be 0.75. So either one of those strategies would work. Here's our word wall talking about tape diagrams, percent increase, and percent decrease, because those were important terms for us for today's lesson. Now let's recap what our goals were for today. We wanted to be able to interpret a tape diagram that represents a percent increase or decrease. And we also wanted to know when I know a starting amount and the percent increase or decrease, that we could find the new amount. So last but not least, I would love for you guys to do the evaluation activity, and you're going to complete the task in your student companion that's entitled Fish Population. We're going to pause the video here for 2 minutes so that you guys can answer the evaluation activity. So that way when we're grading, that we're able to give you some feedback around that answer. So let's pause here for 2 minutes so that you guys can answer the evaluation activity and also submit your student companion. All right. So at this point, you guys should have submitted your student companion in Google Classroom. Thank you so much for doing that and for participating in today's lesson. Now, your independent activity for today is a Mobius math assignment, and the directions are going to be in Google Classroom. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you cannot access the Mobius math assignment, because I know sometimes the website acts a little funny, there will be a screenshot attachment of the problems in Google Classroom. So there is no excuse not to do the problems. Please make sure that you do the problems either on a separate sheet of paper or you can actually do them in Mobius Math. Either way, you will get credit for doing the activity. And that is all for our lesson for today. So that I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and we will see you tomorrow in class for your Friday lesson. Have a great rest of your day.